Hello and welcome to the Beginner's Art class for adults at Delicious Art. Today we're going to be painting this little scene. So what I liked about this scene was that it's got this beautiful blue sky. There's going to be some fun wispy clouds to have a bit of a play with, but it's mostly about the grass, and it's about figuring out how to get the density and the thickness of the grass, and how to move the pastels in a way to achieve that look or the feel of the grass, because we all want to try and create different textures, and pastels are so versatile and you can use them in so many different ways. So today is going to be a little bit of a mix of doing smooth work as far as the sky goes, and then lovely wispy sort of movements for the clouds, and then all the grass strokes. So welcome, and we're going to get started in a minute. So the first part of the class, if you have your notes there, tells you that we're going to be doing a charcoal drawing first up. So the reason for that is that it's just a little bit of a rehearsal for the picture. Helps us get familiar with the tones in the image and the shapes, and also gets you into art mode. So we only spend 10 or 15 minutes on this section, and then we'll go on and do the colour section. So if you feel like you need to stop or pause, please do. And if you're watching this video, you can do that whenever it suits you. But if you're here in class with me today, please speak up and let me know if you're needing a bit more time, or if you want me to slow down. Happy to do that. Cool. All right. So first off, you need an art diary or some drawing paper. This is just regular drawing paper. Oh, somebody's knocking at the door. Just one moment, and I'll see. There's Kathy. Lovely. I'll just let Kathy in. And hi, Kathy. Hi, Kathy. We've already started, so feel free to carry on. We're just going to begin with our charcoal drawing right now. So I hope you're all ready and set up to go. Welcome to today. So this is our little picture, and we're going to draw up our thumbnail section for today with charcoal. I have a little tin of charcoal. This is Willow. It's just a little Montmartre brand. It's pretty cheap. It's only about $7 or something for this little tin. I really like them though because it's soft. Willow charcoal is very soft and it's light. You can push it around with your fingers. It comes off really easily as well. And in this little box you get a few different sizes. So you get fat ones and thin ones. The foil is meant to keep your fingers clean, but of course I break all mine, so I end up with pieces instead of long sticks. But yeah, a good little set of willow charcoal if you're after some. So that's what I'm using today. And you'll notice today that our picture is in a landscape format, so that's wider across the top and narrower on the sides. And I've actually made this one to fit into an A4 page. So if your paper is A4 size, then this should fit in perfectly. If you've got anything in a different size, then you might have to adjust your proportions to fit. This little book is an A4 art diary, but generally I just draw it in like this. So I have a bit of a thumbnail area on my page, and that's going to be where I do my painting or drawing in the charcoal. And as I said, this is just a little rehearsal. It's just a way to get familiar with the picture and study it a little bit before we do it for real or in colour. You can see on the colour version on your notes that I've got a grid mark drawn in. So I have what I call a grid mark. So it's a halfway line across the centre and down the middle. And that's just a way to help us draw the picture. Now, when you have a more detailed picture, you might want to use more grid marks and break it up into smaller sections. And it just helps you find where things sit within the image. This image today doesn't really have a whole lot of strict detail, I guess. So we're just going to do a halfway line across and a halfway mark down. And that will be enough information to help us find where everything needs to be within this picture. So usually in a landscape or something like this, the general rule of thumb is to do everything in thirds. So rather than have a horizon right on the centre line, they say that it's better to have it, a third up or a third down. So either 2/3 of sky and 1/3 of land, or vice versa. It's just more aesthetically pleasing than having the horizon line bang in the middle and equal amounts of earth and sky. So this picture has more sky than grass, so that's cool, which means that our horizon line sits below our halfway mark. And if you look at where it begins on this side of your picture, you can see it starts probably about a third down inside this quarter. So about there. And it goes down on a little slope. We've got long bits of grass that come up above that, but we'll pop those in afterwards. But at the moment, we just want to find the horizon line as it sits within the picture. And I would say it's around about there. So it's on a slight angle, and it comes in on the other side, finishes on the other side at about the halfway mark. So I'm looking behind all the strands of grass and trying to find the part where it's all kind of continuous. So let's say that's our horizon line there. So that means now we've got lots of sky to fill up, which is going to be lots of fun when we do it in colour, because we're going to use a lot of blue pastel and do a lot of blending. So today's class is going to be about making smooth things and making scratchy things like grass. For this exercise though, we're going to just do it in black and white. So what we're looking at is the black and white picture up here and noticing the different tones. So you can see, if you don't look at the colour one and just look here, the black and white, you can see the top section is as dark as around inside the grass. So the sky is a reasonably dark tone. Then we've got light tone where the clouds are, and then we come down into the grass, and the base of the grass is also really dark. Isn't that interesting? So when you first look at this, you would automatically assume the sky's lighter, but it's actually not in the black and white picture. So that's an interesting observation to make, and that'll be important when we choose which blues and things to use for the sky. So first off, we're going to shade the sky in, and then we're going to use the kneadable eraser to take some charcoal out and make the clouds. When we do that with pastels, we'll be actually using light coloured pastels to make the clouds. But it's kind of reverse with charcoal, because we're working on white paper, and we'll put the dark charcoal down and then we can erase some of it to get the clouds in, which will be kind of fun, I think. Then we'll go down and do all the grass. So the reason I like to do the sky first is because it's at the back, or it's behind the grass. So for me, it makes more sense to start at the back and work forward. So that's what we'll be doing today. To fill in the sky area and the big areas with a piece of charcoal, I'm just going to use my short fat piece. So you might have a long fat piece if you've got a new set of these. So you might want to break it, because I find a long piece on its side is a bit more tricky to use, especially because the willow charcoal's not flat or straight, it's natural. So it's not always going to lie down flat on your page. So you might want to break a bit of that off. You don't have to. If you want to use a thin piece, you can. I just find it easier with a chunky piece to hold and pull across my paper. So looking at the black and white picture, I'm going to grab my chunky piece and just literally wipe that across the top part of my sky and fill that in with charcoal. And then we're going to push it in with some fingers. As you get down towards the top of the grass, just press a bit lighter so that it's not pure white, but it's a little bit lighter than the top of the sky. Okay, so the top of the sky is quite dark, really, when you look at the tones. And then as you come down, it gets a little bit lighter. So just press lighter and you'll put less charcoal onto your paper. Don't worry about the clouds. We'll put them in after. So don't feel like you've got to leave out anything to put the clouds in, because we can actually remove some charcoal with the eraser. So next thing you want to do is get your fingers and just push this in with your fingers. And you'll find, because it's willow, and depending on the kind of paper you've got, it might sort of feel like it's coming off a little bit, and the willow will do that because it's really soft. So it's not like a hard compressed charcoal, it's quite soft, and you can kind of push it around quite a lot. And I'm pulling my finger left to right, so I'm doing these lovely big wide movements because I want a nice smooth wide sky. So the way you move your finger will also impact on how things will look at the end. So that will do for sky for this point. This is just a little practice run, so we're not going to get too involved in getting it perfect at this stage. What I want to do is just darken off the top just a little bit more. So I'm going to put a bit more charcoal down because then we can really emphasize the light areas. If you have plenty of dark, the lights will pop. So again, just pulling that around left to right so that you've got a nice gradation from your dark down into the light area. And we'll put some clouds in there in a second. All right, so next thing we want to do is grab your kneadable eraser, and if you've got a big one, you might want to pull a piece off, and you can just pull off small pieces. It's a little bit like blue tack, it's wonderful. And this works beautifully with charcoal, but it also works really well with pastel too. So these are very handy. So I'm going to pull off a little bit. And what we want to do now is just kind of run it around over where you see these clouds. It's like drawing with it. It's almost drawing with it. And we're just going to rub off some of the charcoal with the eraser and do these soft, wispy kind of movements with it to get some of those clouds in there. So it's interesting to play with, and the more you kind of press on there, the more charcoal it'll take off. But you have to keep finding a new spot, because if you keep dabbing with the same spot, you just put more charcoal back on again, because what it does is it picks it up onto the eraser. So you keep kneading it. That's why they call it a kneadable eraser, starting with a K, kneading like bread. And then you can knead it and find a clean spot and just keep kind of dabbing and removing some of that charcoal. So it doesn't matter if you don't get the shapes right at this point. We just want to experience what this feels like, because it's quite fun, and you can dab it and pull it around and smudge it with your fingers and put more charcoal down. If you take too much off, you can put some more on and just let it kind of wisp around like that. And it's kind of fun just to have a bit of a play with the eraser and see what you can create. Have a little bit of a play with that. And then notice that as you come down towards the grass, we've got all these beautiful, big, sweepy, beautiful, soft, sweeping clouds that kind of sit at the base of the sky there. And they sort of come in from both sides, don't they? And we've got this big bank of cloud here. So what I've done is I've literally rubbed out some of that charcoal, and it's now stuck into my eraser. And you can see the eraser gets quite dirty, so it's full of charcoal. And so, as I said before, if you needed to find a clean spot, just keep kneading it until you find a spot that doesn't have any dirt or charcoal or pigment on it. And then you can use that to get some more charcoal off. And where you want whiter bits, so, you know, in the cloud, for instance, there's a couple of little spots that are a little bit whiter, and you can kind of dab on those a little bit harder to get it a little bit whiter, so you're showing the paper through from underneath. So it's just fun to have a play. Kind of fun shapes. I can see dragons and all sorts and stuff in there. Cool. And you'll notice the more you rub, the more you get off, and then you might want to pop some back on. So you can just come back over with your charcoal if you want and softly smoosh it over again and let it rub in. So there you go. So that's a little bit of cloud work. And as I said, when we do this with pastels, it'll be a different procedure because we'll be actually putting white pastel or light pastel down rather than taking it off like we've just done with the charcoal. Now let's look at the grass. So looking at the grass in the black and white picture, I can see that it's really quite dark all the way across the face here, isn't it? So I want to again use my fat chunky bit of charcoal and just fill in the bottom area nice and dark. So you might have to press a bit harder to get the charcoal to go blacker on here. And then as you come up towards the horizon, so where the grass starts to poke up into the sky, you don't want it quite as dark there because it's a gradual kind of blend from a really thick dark grass up into wispy pieces that sort of stand up in front of the sky. So as you get up towards the surface or the edge of the horizon there, just make sure that it's not a hard, sharp line and that you keep it kind of loose like that. And you can just kind of, just lightly then, rub the charcoal around, and what happens is the paper picks up a little bit of it and then kind of leaves some gaps, and that's what we want. We want to keep some gaps there so that it's got a nice natural grassy kind of edge rather than a hard line. Because if we put a hard line across, I'll show you for example, like that, and then you do your grass, it's harder to get the grass to have a natural kind of merge from, you know, thin wispy bits that come from the top and then go down into the thicker bottom. So this doesn't work unless that's a hard edge that we want to look at. But if it's a soft edge like we've got, then you kind of need to vary the thickness as you get higher. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So that you're kind of blurring the edges a little bit and it looks a lot more natural then. Okay, so now we've got all this dark in here. This is what we'll be doing with pastels when we get onto that. I want you to start just doing some gestures of grass. Now you can use your short fat bit of charcoal like this if you want. And I'm using the tip of it or the edge of it, so that's giving me some lovely sharp lines or marks. So when I do this, I'm kind of just sweeping it back and forth and I'm holding it quite loose and I'm doing it in different directions. So rather than doing this kind of thing, so when you do that, you're getting all the same width of line and you're getting the same height, and it starts to look a bit like a fence and it's not as loose and natural as this grass looks. So the other way, or the way to get it to look softer and more natural, is to just kind of hold your stick a little bit looser and do these up and down kind of gentle little marks, crisscrossing over. Some you press lighter, some you press harder. When you press harder, you get a darker mark. If you press light, you just get these wispy lines, and you build your grass up doing that. So as I said, you can use your short fat stick like this one, or you can pick up your thin one again, which you might find easier because you can hold it at the end. So when you're holding it, hold it loosely. And I'm left-handed, so if that's looking weird to you, that's probably why. But if you hold your stick loosely like this, you'll get a much freer kind of line. If you hold it like you would a pen or a pencil like this, then it's much harder to get that loose kind of flow because your hand is stiffer. If you hold it at the end and just keep it loose, you get a much more natural, beautiful flow. And I'm just going up and down here. So I'm not going, you know, from down, 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 down. It's kind of nearly leaving my bit of charcoal on the paper just about, and kind of just swishing it around. And what you want to do is have different heights, different lengths, and different pressure. So hard pressure for a hard line, light pressure for all the soft bits. And then you can do a few little, you know, dark ones that will kind of come forward. So when you do a harder, darker mark, it makes it a stronger one. But it also brings it closer to us because it's more defined. So things that are further away are going to be softer and blurred, and things that are closer are more defined and brighter or darker. So that is literally how I do nice loose grass. Just keep your hand lovely and loose. That way you can kind of move your arm more too if you don't hold it tight. So you've got a lot more freedom of movement. And that's now creating a nice big, cluster of grass. And I should have mentioned that it looks like it's all kind of blowing in over to the right a little bit, doesn't it, this grass? Because maybe the wind has got it going that way. So you might want to, make most of your grass go in that direction. Not all of it though. You've got to kind of crisscross some of it over. And then when we want to highlight some of these grasses, so you can see in the picture there's a few little light ones as well that sit in the foreground. So when we do those in colour, we'll be able to use lighter coloured pastels. But for this exercise, because we're just working with black, you're going to have to get that kneadable eraser again. And what I like to do is make like a knife edge with it. So squeeze it until you've got a nice little, like a blade, sharp edge on it. And then I can kind of draw bits of grass with that edge. And that way, I'm going to get some light ones coming through on top of my dark, if that makes sense. So, and I've got to keep finding clean edges in my eraser. So by doing that, see how, and pressing fairly firmly for a few of them, it just makes me get these beautiful little bits of shiny blades of grass that have a light or a shine on them. And they literally look white then because we're taking the charcoal off and letting the paper do the work. So, and by breaking up the direction, so if you look at the grass in the picture, you can see some of it kind of goes nearly sideways, doesn't it? With a few little bits that run right across in front of all the other ones, and they almost lie down on their sides. So putting a few in on the side or in different directions really helps to build up the depth and the thickness of a bunch of grass like this. So I can do all these little light ones like that, and again keep reshaping that bit of eraser, giving myself nice little knife blade edges, finding clean edges. And then when you want to come back in, and once you've got a few of those in there, come back in again with your charcoal just to break up the lines a bit in the foreground and put a few dark ones back in. And that again creates the depth of the grass. So you can see how some of those lighter ones now look like they're sitting behind some in the foreground because I put dark ones back in. And you can kind of keep doing that. I wouldn't go too much further. It's working pretty nicely at the moment, but you can keep just crisscrossing a few over each other, getting some little white ones or light ones back in there, and then putting another couple of darks over in some spots. So doing grass is actually, it's not difficult, but it just takes a while because you've got to be patient, and it's the same kind of gesture over and over, and you've got to build it up in layers. The other thing that's in this grass is it's like wheat, isn't it? These little shafts on the top. So you could actually do some little, just a few, you don't have to do every single blade, but just do a few little shafts like that kind of sit on the top of stalks of grass so that they look like, they've got a seeds or something on the top of them. Just a few of those will really help to make it look like wheat or seeds or grass with weeds or whatever they are. And also make sure that you don't do those bits just all along the top. So make sure you pop some down a bit lower. So again, it's all about the natural look. It's about trying to keep it fairly random and not create patterns. Because we're creatures of habit, us humans, and we like to have patterns. We like to line things up and have things all sorted out and looking neat and tidy. But yeah, for grasses like this is wild grass out in the field somewhere. We want to try and keep it nice and loose and natural looking. So you've got to vary the way that you hold the charcoal and the angle of your hand and the way you twist your arm. So sometimes you might want to twist it, you know, over just to get a different gesture. Okay, so that pretty much is our charcoal part of the class today. And of course, if you wanted to get back into your clouds up here, I was just looking and thinking, oh, they could be a little bit whiter in a couple of spots, or I could darken them off in a couple of areas as well, just to give a bit more variation in there. But we'll have a bit more play with those when we do the pastels. So that's today's charcoal session. Now, if you want to keep going with that, then just press pause or let me know, and I can slow down a little bit and wait for a minute until you're ready to move on to the next segment. Don't be afraid to speak up. Okay, we'll keep moving. So, as I said earlier, we're going to do this in pastels now, and we're going to have to pick out some colours that match this picture. Of course, you don't always have to match the picture. You can always, choose completely different colours. So up to you, but I like to do realist sort of art, and I like to try and make things look as, real as possible. But still have a bit of an arty, finish to it. So we're going to do this in the colours that we see today. However, feel free to change it up if you want to. Okay, so you need your reference photo close by. I also have my picture on an iPad in front of me, so I can look at that and I can zoom in and see detail if I want to, which is really handy. And first up, we're going to pick out some colours. You might need charcoal too, so keep that handy as well. Charcoal and pastels work really nicely together. So looking at some colours, I did pre-select some. So this is my little palette, and I'm going to make a swatch of each one and talk about each one so that you can choose your colours while we do this if you haven't got them already organised. So in the sky, normally in a sky, you'll find that on a clear blue sky, it's usually darker down towards the horizon and gets a little bit lighter as you go higher. I don't know that this actually applies to this picture, but anyway, that's what I know. So what I've got here is I've got three blues basically that I've got from my sky and my clouds. And this is my ultramarine blue. It's beautiful, this blue. And if you have a stock standard set of pastels, then you should have one of those in there. So that's a really nice, rich blue, and I like the depth of that. So that's that little one there. And that's going to be our darker blue. Then I have a mid blue. So this is like a sky blue. If you have one of those, that would be awesome. If not, we'll make do. We can mix white or cream or something light to make that. And then I've got a very light blue. So this is my pale blue, which is a beautiful colour. So I'm going to need probably all of those to do my sky and my clouds. And for the clouds, I'll probably use my pale blue rather than white. So if you've done my classes before, you know that I like to save my white for last, or for the final layer. So I have white here, but I won't use that until we get to the final layer of the clouds. What I also have is a warm grey. See how they're slightly different? So the warm grey is a bit darker than the white, but on top of the sky, it'll look white. And I have this one too, which is like a more creamy, I think that's called Australian grey. So if you don't have any of those, then we'll just stick with white and we can kind of mix it and get it to work. but a very light blue or a very pale grey will be helpful if you have one, or a cream. So that's basically the sky colours. And then we're going to look at the earth. So I've got my blue violet, which is your darkest one. It's like black, but not quite so dark. It's beautiful. And that's a stock standard too. You must have that if you want to do shadows and lights and darks and so forth. It's really essential, I think, anyway, for your darks. I've also got this, it's like a magenta, dark magenta. So that's really nice as well for your darks. I think it's called that, I'm not sure, but it's like a reddy maroon sort of colour, which is going to be beautiful in the shadows for the grasses. The other colour I have is an olive green, so it's like a dirty, earthy green, and that's going to also be lovely in the dirt and the earth and the background. I've got a lime green too. I don't know whether I'll use a lot of that, but it's fun to have a little bit of something bright. And I've got this beautiful yellow. I feel like I might need to get an ochre as well. So I'll just go grab, which is like a straw coloured yellow. Let's see what I've got. Maybe that's a bit too, oh, no, that'd work. So that one as well. So they're my colours for this picture. And as you know, if you feel like you want to grab other colours as you go, then, you know, that's fine too. But it's always good to start off with a basic palette, and then you can kind of add to it if you need to. It's quite a lot of colours actually. So what have I got there? 12 colours altogether. And as I said earlier, if you don't have the same colours, then just see if you can find something that's close. So I know sometimes it's hard to get a really nice green. You might have a green that's not quite as bright as that. That's okay, we can use that. If you don't have this lovely magenta colour, then maybe you've got a dark red or something that would work. So just try and see how you go to match your colours up. And as I said, they don't have to be exactly the same as that. You've just got to try and get something close. And the most important thing to think about really is the tones. So when you're choosing your colours like this, you want to make sure that you've got enough darks and enough lights and enough mids, and figuring out which colour sits where within that range of tone. So I've tried to do these in range, you know, in order basically. So we've got 3 blues. So I've got my darkest blue, and then these 2 blues I would call mid. And then I've got my light colours over here. And then on the earth side, we've got our blue violet and this lovely magenta. And then I've got my mid colours, which is my olive green, my bright green and my yellow, and probably that straw colour. And then I'll use some of the lights that I've got in the sky for a few of the lighter highlighted areas in the grass. So you've got to think about dark to light as well as colour, because that's what catches the eye. It's the thing that makes, I think, a picture more interesting, is if you've got a nice range of dark to light. Just my opinion. But I love things that sort of, yeah, can take your breath away because of the brightness and the darkness. So they're the colours that I've picked out for today. And I said in the notes that a blue or a light coloured paper would be good for this painting, although it doesn't really matter because we're going to fill the whole thing in. So if you don't have, you know, any coloured paper, then don't stress. We'll just use whatever pastel paper you've got. Pastel paper is preferable. If you have watercolour paper or something like that, it's not quite as good, and the pastel won't stick as well. So this is the colour I've picked out for mine today. Only because I don't have a light blue handy, didn't get any, and also because this is the yellowy tone in the grass, and I thought, oh, that might work quite nicely with that. But whatever you've got, you might have, you know, a pinky grey colour or a black even would be just as nice, because your black would be beautiful to bring out all those darks. So you can pretty much use anything really in this one. A blue would be great, because then you might not need to get as much blue pastel down onto your paper. You can rely on the paper, or the colour, to be part of the sky, or vice versa. You can rely on a yellow or a green to be part of your grass. But either way, we're going to fill it all in. So you might end up with some sore fingers today after we blend in that sky. It's fun though, lots of fun. Okay, so what we'll do next is just rule up our page and lightly draw up where everything is, which isn't that much really, it's just the horizon line. And we'll have a little 10-minute break so we can grab a cuppa and drink of water or whatever. Then we'll come back and get stuck into the colours. Okay, so that's the theory. So I'm going to pop my pastels over to the side. It's good to keep them in a separate little container like this. So if you don't get this finished today and you want to come back tomorrow, you've got all the pastels that you used in one place. And that way you don't have to go through your whole collection to remember what you used. So I learnt that trick the hard way. So best to keep them separate in a little box. Paper towel is also great too. I'll just bring that back again. Paper towel is great because you can wipe them and clean them off. Because as you can see, when they rub around together, they pick up colour from each other and they get a bit grubby. And sometimes it's hard to see what colour something actually is, especially your whites. If they've been, wandering around with other colours, they tend to get a bit dirty and you can't tell. I'm hoping that's white. I think it might be. So paper towel is wonderful for that. It's also good to have a spare piece in your hand so you can just wipe them off if you need to as you're using them. I've got a little towel here next to me, so I use that to tip the dust off my page and also to wipe my hands on. And I've also got another little towel. So I've got a towel lying on my table for all the dust. And then I've got another little bit of a cloth here, an old towel. So one end is wet, it's a bit grubby, I know. But one end I've wet, so I can clean my fingers with it, and then I can dry them on the other end and get stuck into the next colour. Because you might find that in between colours you might be putting blue sky down, and you might pick up some of the dark and then go back to your sky and smudge it and make it all dirty because you've got other colours on your fingers. So better if you can clean them all off. So handy to have a little towel nearby with a wet end and a dry end. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to pop my palette over there for now and put my art diary away for next time. Awesome. And then here's my piece of paper. So what I've done is I've ruled this picture up to fit into an A4 page. And this colour fix paper is slightly bigger than A4. So to try and make things work for everybody, because we don't all have this particular paper, and A4 is a much more common size, I thought, well, it's probably better to make everything fit into an A4 page. And then if you have something bigger, you can just make it, rule it off. So A4 is 297 by 21, 210 mil, sorry. This is 300 by 23. So I'm going to stick with 300 because it's only 3 mil more than what an A4 is. I'm not going to worry about the width, but the height I need to reduce by about 2 centimetres because A4 is 21 and this is 23. So I'm going to rule a line across the top and the bottom of this because it's slightly too big. And when you try to fit things into spaces that are not in proportion, you can get yourself into a world of trouble. And I know in this particular picture, it doesn't really matter that much. I could add a bit more sky or I could add a bit more grass, and I probably will. But it means that if I go out to Kmart or somewhere and get an A4 frame, then the thing we make is going to fit. So sometimes you might want to frame the picture or, just have a standard size that's going to work out for everything. So let's stick with the A4 option. So I've ruled that off. So these two top and bottom areas will be, are the edge of my picture. Cool. And then what we want to do is rule up the grid line. So you want to find your halfway point, which for this particular page is 15, because it's 30 wide, 300. And rule a line down the middle and then measure up 10.5 to make my line across the other way. And so sometimes the lines are more crucial than other times. In this instance, it's nice to have, but you don't desperately need it. Looks really crooked on there. It's not though. It's okay, I think. I'll double check that now. 10.5, just a little bit. Let me do that again. Yeah, it is. Ha. Okay. So what I'm using is a pastel pencil, and you can use either pastel pencil or charcoal pencil or charcoal with pastels, but don't use a graphite or a lead pencil, because that will show through the pastels. You can't actually cover it up. So graphite is not your friend. If you have any nearby, just hide them from yourself so you can't use them. I've had to do that, to put them out of reach, because I forget sometimes and then I can't get it off, which is kind of annoying. So we'll rule up our lines like that, and then either charcoal or pencil. Charcoal's often better because it's soft and it's easier to get off if you want to remove anything. So a little stick of willow charcoal like this will be perfect. And again, we can just rule up or draw up that horizon line, which is about there. It's just roughly. It's a little higher on the right, lower on the left. And then that kind of gives us the space where we know we've got to put the sky in this bit and the grass in this bit. So nothing too complicated today, hopefully. And then if you want to, you can try and take out your grid line. I know we've just put it in, but sometimes it's better to get it off the page rather than try and cover it up. So it'll cover fine though today. So don't stress too much. Okay, so now we're good to go. And we'll have a little break and we'll come back and then we'll get stuck into the colour, and we're going to blend in that sky, push all the blue into the paper and fill it up really nice, and get a nice gradient from the darker blue down to the mid blue. So I'm going to go dark blue at the top because that's what the picture looks like to me. It's actually darker now that I'm looking at it on the screen. It's a little bit darker on the top right. But anyway, I won't complicate things. So darker across the top, slightly lighter blue across the bottom, and we'll put all the blue down first and then we'll pop the clouds in over the top. But what we want to do is merge these two so that we get a nice blend from dark to light. So if you don't want to take a break and you want to get stuck into that now, go for it. Otherwise, we'll come back in 10 minutes. So that will be at, what is it now, 1:49. So we'll come back at 1:59, just on 2. About 2, that sounds good. So it's 1:50 now. So I'll see you in 10 minutes. Cool. All right, so now we're going to fill in the sky. And as I said earlier, we're going to do these 2 blues. So the best way I find to fill in a big area is to just literally put your pastel down on the page, find a flat side if you can. Sometimes it's easier than others. And literally just pull that across and colour in the whole thing. Oh, I forgot to tape it down. Okay, hang on a sec. I'll finish this bit. What I've done is just literally wipe the pastel over the page to get some colour or pigment onto the page. Before we go any further, because I was holding it as I was doing that, which reminded me that I hadn't taped it down onto my little board. So having a board like this is really handy, and I've got tape running across the the top and the bottom, which I used this morning. So I'm just going to reuse that. Hopefully it'll stay. It's not going to. It's not very sticky anymore. So you can tape down the corners, or you can tape it across the bottom, or whichever way you want. If you're on an easel, you might want to tape it all around so that it doesn't fall off. I just find it's better to tape your paper down, because then you don't have to hold on to it and it stays put. A lot easier. Just put that there. That's better. Okay, so make sure you do that. And what's happened here is, because I've used this tape before, it's not sticking quite so well, but it's sticking enough just to keep it down for me, so I'm not going to worry too much. When you do put tape down for the first time, make sure that you stick it onto fabric or your clothing or something first, just to get a bit of that adhesive off, because sometimes it can be quite strong, and when you take it off your page it can tear. So it's probably a good thing that it's not sticking so much. And you don't want to tear your painting, so yeah, it's always a good idea to stick it on something else first, just before you put it on your paper. All right, so back to this. So I've just wiped my dark blue across here, and mostly on the top area of the sky. And then I'm going to put my mid blue, so that's the one that's not quite as dark, because it looks like it's lighter towards the bottom. Now that's probably because there's clouds there, but this is a good exercise just to experience how to blend your colours together and get a nice gradation between the two. So there's not a real lot of difference, but it does make a slight difference. And it's always nice to have a little bit of variation in your sky rather than just one big flat blue or one flat colour. So I've got this blue and my ultramarine blue at the top there. So now I'll put those back in my little box. Now you need to choose a couple of fingers, and as you blend it in, go from side to side, because this is a sky and it's a lovely wide expanse of colour and it's kind of smooth. So what we want to do is get a nice smooth, even finish. So what I'm doing is I'm dragging my fingers across my page like this. I'm going from left to right, left, right, left, right, just kind of pulling it back and forth across the page. And so that should start to create a really nice smooth coverage of colour. And it will depend also on your paper. So you might have paper that is still showing through. You might have different kinds of pastels that might not be quite as thick or creamy, and you might have to do a couple of layers. So if it's not covering it for the first layer, don't stress. It just means you need to put it down again and rub it all in again. So sometimes you've got to do that with pastels. You just need to get the layers down and push it in, and then put another down on top. So what I'm doing while I'm doing this is I'm keeping my fingers, I've got two on the page at the moment, and I'm leaving them on the paper basically. So I haven't lifted them off at all, and I'm just keeping them down flat and pulling it across. And I can see now as I come down that my lighter blue is probably not quite as creamy as my darker blue, and you can see some of my paper showing through. So it seems a little bit kind of thinner, not covering it quite as well. That's okay. We've got to get one coat down first, and then we'll put another one on. What I'm trying to do is get a nice gradation from dark to the lighter blue without having a hard line or a definite place where the colours switch over. So you kind of want to merge them together. So that means like just pulling your fingers down through here and then dragging that darker blue down into the lighter blue, and then going the opposite way. So pulling the lighter blue, pulling them sideways and up into the darker blue, so that we're starting to create this gradual blend from dark to light, like that. And then we're going to pop more pastel down just to thicken it up and make it a little bit richer. Okay, so as I said, your pastels might be a bit more chalky or a bit more dry, and one coat might not do it, and often it doesn't. Often you need to bang it all down again. So same kind of scenario, just get your pastel and wipe it on again. And this will get the colour lovely and rich and thick again. So same sort of thing. As I work my way down into the lighter blue, I'm putting less on because I don't want that to go too dark. So see how it's just sitting on the surface there? You can see all the texture of the paper showing through. And then I'm going to get my lighter blue again and do the same thing, but go from the bottom and work upwards. And again, just pulling it across, nice big wide strokes because the sky is nice and wide. You always got to think about the thing that you're painting and the direction that you pull the pastel around in to imitate the texture or the feeling of it. And in this instance, your sky is very, very blue and smooth. So we want a blue, smooth kind of finish. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to start at the top and push this in again. And you can see there's quite a lot of dust now sitting on my page. So sometimes when your paper gets full or you've got a dry pastel, it'll put a lot of dust on your page like I'm getting there. You can see it's all gathering at the sides as I push it across. That's okay, we can tip it all off. The temptation to blow it off is great, but try not to do that, especially if you're inside in your house, because it does sort of go everywhere. So now I've got 3 fingers and I'm pulling this across, and as I'm pulling it across I'm going up because I want to kind of merge that light blue into the dark and create this beautiful gradual blend. Skies are much more interesting when you've got a couple of tones of blue in there. I'm quite happy with how that's working out now. So that's the sort of finish that you want to get. So that you've got this lovely, gentle, blurry blend. Beautiful. Okay, and we're leaving the grassy bit empty at this point because we can put that in afterwards. So now you've probably got really blue fingers like me, and the best thing you need to do now is tip off your dust. So if you've got a little hand towel on the table next to you, I'll keep a little, like an old tea towel there, and I just tip my dust off onto that. Just go sideways like this, tip it up and bang it onto the cloth. And then later on I'll take that outside, give it a good shake and get rid of it. So pastels are very dirty and dusty. That's it is a disadvantage, but compared to other mediums I think they're wonderful because you don't need any water, you don't need any tools other than your fingers and maybe a blender or two. There's no mediums, there's no solvents, you don't have to wait for it to dry. It's really great. So I could come back to this in a week's time and it'll be exactly right as it is right now, or I can, leave it for a year. So it's wonderful. It's immediate and there's no waiting. Okay, so now we've got that happening. Let's have a look at these clouds and see what they're doing. What we want to do now is start to get some of this cloud formation in. It's a funny little shape, really. And if you don't like the shape of the clouds, then you can make your own. In fact, if you don't like those ones in the middle there, which do look a bit odd, I have to say, leave them out. Like, this is your painting and you get to be the one that decides what goes in there. So you technically don't need to put any of those in there. You can just leave that part of the sky beautiful and blue, and then you can pop a bit of cloud down in the bottom second area here, and then we can put the grass over in front of the cloud. So up to you, because normally I do what is in the picture, so I'm going to do that today, but as I said, you don't need to if you don't want to. It's a good little exercise though. So when I'm doing clouds, I like to use light colours but not necessarily white, because I like to save my white for the whitest parts, if that makes sense. So you'll probably hear me say that a lot. I often say, let's save the light for last, or save the white for last. So I've got this grey colour, which is a warm grey. Now when I put that down on my sky, it will look white because it'll be lighter than the sky. But then I can add a pale blue as well, and that will also look lighter. So you can see they're a little bit grubby, these ones. See if I can find a clean side. So that's my grey, that's my pale blue. And then I have what, this is like a creamy colour. Just wipe it and make it clean again. That's Australian grey, so it's a little bit more yellow. So any of those would be a fine colour to use for some clouds to start with. And then I've got white, which we can add on at the end for the highlights. So that's generally how I like to do white clouds anyway. So let's start off. You can choose which one you want to use. You don't have to use all of these, just if you probably may not have them all. Let's go with, I'll go with the light blue. I'll leave the other two out so that we're just keeping our palette limited down to a couple of colours. So this is my pale blue. So I'm just going to literally drop that on here really lightly. So what we want to do is make wispy clouds. I'll just put it down on its side. I didn't mean to do that. So now it's left a bit of something over there. That's okay. And so I want wispy clouds. So what I'm doing is just letting this sort of drag itself across the page like this and keeping it nice and light. I don't want it to be too heavy or strong. And so when you're doing clouds with pastels, you can just get the most beautiful textures and feelings because you can see through the pastels. You know, they're so translucent. So a lot of this I can actually leave as it is and just let it be a little bit of a wispy cloud that you can still see the sky through. Now you can see I've got some crumbs on there from when I picked it up. So this is quite a crummy or dusty sort of pastel, this one. I'm not sure what brand it is. It's quite chunky. And so again, I'm just literally just touching it on the surface and pushing it around lightly to get these lovely wispy marks. We're going to drag this around a little bit with our fingers in a minute, so that will kind of soften it off a bit. And then, so just try and sort of copy, if you're doing this part, copy the shapes that you can see around there like that. Okay. And then on the sides, I feel like I need to break this. It's a bit too chunky. It's a sad thing when you've got to break beautiful pastels, but it's a bit too big for what I'm trying to do. If I lie it down, I'm going to have a bigger mark than what I want. So sadly, I'm going to break it. I'll shadow it, not literally. All right, so now it's a shorter piece, so I've got a little bit more control, especially on a an A4 size page. So sadly, you might have to break your pastels, but what I want to do is I want to pull it across like this. See how when I pull it, we've got those lovely sweeping shapes that come in from the right over there. And so when I pull the pastel across like that, it just does the most magnificent shapes onto the paper. And because the paper's textured, it's kind of just grabbing it on the surface and letting some of the sky show through underneath. That's exactly what I wanted. Pastels are magnificent for clouds. And so I'm just running this around. I can see there's a few, wispy kind of wide clouds through there. Something like that. So that's probably enough on the page for now. I'm just going to put this white one away so I don't pick that up accidentally in a minute. And now, so you can see we've got this kind of just soft little bits of pale blue on top of here. What I'm going to do is tip off the dust because I don't want to get these big crummy ones and push them in. And then we'll do a little bit of very gentle blending. So I'm going to tip my dust off there. That crumb stayed there, so I'm going to have to make it into a cloud now, this one up here. Make sure you've got nice clean fingers. So that's the tricky bit. Get your little cloth and give your fingers a nice wipe so that you've got most of that pigment off your fingers. I mean, they're not perfectly clean, but they're near enough. And now let's look at the outside of these clouds. So you can see where it's whitest, this very top little bit. I'm just going to pull it out lightly with my fingers. Just sort of smush it around a little bit. See how that makes it all kind of wispy and lovely? So, and then again the same. So just kind of pull your finger and don't press too hard. I'm not pressing hard at all, I'm pressing really lightly. And so what's happening is it's sort of blurring all the edges and making it lovely and wispy, like clouds are, aren't they? So this is just the first layer. We're going to add a little bit more to this. And just pulling your finger, and look at the shape or the direction of the clouds. So if they kind of look like they're a bit wind blown, and then maybe blowing off to the left or the right, just do these little wiggly movements with your finger as you waft it across, and go left and right with your finger so that you're sort of pulling the pigment across and it's looking like it's got some wind or breeze in there. And the harder you press, the muddier it's going to make it. So when I say muddy, I mean it'll just push it into the sky or the blue, and it'll kind of get a little bit lost. And that's okay. We can always put more on, which is the lovely thing about pastels. You can just add more. I'll push that little crumb in that I didn't mean to put there. So see how that sits sort of softly on the surface like that. And if I tip that up now, it's kind of been pushed in enough that it'll just hold on and stick to the paper basically. So we can do the same with these ones down the bottom here. So if you're only doing those ones, and not those funny ones in the middle, just do the same kind of thing, just pull them across. So look at the direction they're flowing in basically, and pull them. Now if these were soft fluffy clouds, we'd be doing fluffy movements with our fingers. We'd be doing soft little fluffy, round squiggly lines rather than these sideways ones. But because they're wispy and soft and blowing in the wind, we want to keep them really gentle and soft. So see how that just keeps it looking lovely and cloudy. Now I know there's a couple of spots on there that are thicker or more dense. So if you want to, pick up your blue again or whatever you've just used to make those little bits of light cloud, and just touch it down again very lightly in a couple of spots when you can see that it's more dense or opaque, like that. So I've just done a few little squiggly sort of marks around there. And then I'm going to do another one up here. Just noticing on the picture, refer back to your photo and look at where it's whiter or brighter or denser. It's not everywhere, it's just in a few spots. And pop a little bit more pigment or pastel down on there. And this one here. Funny shape, these clouds. They're a little bit weird looking, but anyway. That's what was there, so that's what we'll do. And same on the sweepy ones on the side. So you can see there's kind of more opacity on a couple of the sides there. And then down here in the middle section, see where it's much lighter or lighter. And through there. So I'm just pressing a bit harder with the pastel, the sticker pastel, and getting it to kind of stick onto the paper a bit more. So when you want richer, deeper, stronger colour, you press harder, and then that puts more pigment on the page and it kind of makes it like a thicker colour. It's like adding more paint really, if you're a painter. So see how I've kind of just whitened or lightened up a few spots on there? So once you've done that, then you do the same thing. So I'll clean my fingers off a little bit, and now I'm just going to dab this a little bit. So now I'm not blending or rubbing so much. I'm just going to kind of put your finger into the whiter areas and then just gently push it across. So just slightly wipe it across. You don't have to. You can let it just sit on the surface and not push it in at all if you like the density of it. Just going to open the door and get some air in here. That's better. Okay. And the same on the bigger pieces. So you can kind of just pull that through. And again, press lighter. And the lighter you press, the better the colour kind of just sits on the surface. The harder you press, the more you're going to push it into the colour underneath. And it'll kind of get a bit murky or lost. And that's not a bad thing always, but if you want the colour to sit on the surface, especially for clouds like this, because we want them to kind of shine a little bit, don't we? All right, so now we've got that going on. Next thing we want to do is look at where it's whitest in the clouds, and we're going to add the white. Remember I said we add the white, save the white for last. So this is where you get to kind of add the real highlights and make it shine. This is my white pastel. So I'm just going to pop a bit of white here. You can see there's white in that bit there. And you don't want to put it everywhere because then it kind of loses its wow factor, basically. So we just want to put it in a few spots, not all over the place. Because the whitest part of the cloud is where the sun's catching it. It's lovely and shiny and bright. And so up here, above or behind what's going to be grass, there's a fair bit of white cloud in there. And again, I'm just using the little sticker pastel on its side, so I'm getting a nice wide mark. No hard lines, because clouds are soft and fluffy. They don't have hard lines usually. So keep your pastel on its side so you get those lovely little soft edges. And see how, because we've put the white on last, it's now got a lovely range of tones from your light blue and then letting some of the sky show through, and then the whitest white. So that gives it the glow. I've got a bit of dust on there as well, so I'm going to tip that off and then very gently, and not too much because I don't want to lose the brightness of the white. So up in these ones here, these funny middle ones where I've got a bit of white, I'm going to leave those. I just want those to glow like that. But this one here is bothering me a bit, so I just want to push that in a tiny bit just to soften it off and merge it in a bit more. And now that I'm working in this section, I can see that there are kind of fluffy cloud shapes in there. So if I want to make this look more fluffy, you get your finger and you just kind of do these little round fluffy shapes with your finger, little movements, and wiggle them around randomly so that it kind of picks up the pigment and on your finger, and then you kind of carry it across and it starts to look a bit cloudy or fluffy. Okay, and then on the other side there, I can do the same over there. And as you do that, you sort of, you push the pigment in a little bit, but leave some of the white areas sort of nearly untouched so that they glow on the surface. So that's looking quite cloudy and nice now. And that's probably enough. I don't want to do too much more to that because if you keep working on it and putting more white or light blue on there, it's just going to build it up and get it thicker and thicker. And then you'll get to a point where you can't get any more pastel on the paper. So it's best to stop when you're ahead, I reckon. If you want to touch it up later on, then you've still got a bit of, leeway to do that. I think that'll be fine for what we're doing next. So now, once you've got your sky sorted and you're happy with how that's looking, then we can move on to the grass. So now we're going to work on the grass. And if you look at the picture, you can see that there's quite a lot of dark in the bottom of it here. So what we want to do is block in some of that dark area because we're building up the depth now. So we're actually going to put some dirt down there and then we're going to grow the grass basically. So we need to grab your darkest colours that you've picked out for your grass. So that'll be the blue violet. So this is my darkest one, this blue violet here. And that's going to be my shadow kind of colours. And then I've also got this beautiful magenta. Now, if you don't have that one, you might have a dark red or reddy brown or something like that. That will work. So they're my two darkest colours for putting under the grass, basically, because we've got to get some stuff under there before we can build the grass, if that makes sense. So let's do that. and block in some of this darkness. So when I squint at this, or if you look at the black and white picture, you can see it's actually quite dark all the way across there, isn't it? But it's darkest in the bottom right-hand corner. So pick up your blue violet and just smush that around. And don't put it up too close to your sky. What we want to try and do is keep that sky nice and clean. So let's just put all this dark stuff across the face here. So I'm going to put my blue violet mostly across the bottom, like that. And then I'm going to get this magenta-y colour, or your reddy brown, whatever you've got. It's kind of got a red tinge to it if you have a reddish kind of colour, because red is just lovely. And it's also in dirt, you know, red soil, etc., etc. So that's all we need to do, really, is just put some of these darks down onto the paper. And we're going to blend that in, get really dirty fingers, and then we can start to build up on the grass. So let's push this in now. Now, think about dirt. What shape is dirt? It's kind of lumpy, isn't it, and bumpy. So move your finger around in a lumpy, bumpy shape. I know that's a weird thing to say, but it's not smooth like sky, and it's not all in one direction. So it's kind of like fluffy clouds, really, I suppose. So we just want to move this around, and don't go all the way up to the top if you can help it. What we want to do, because you can see in the picture that most of that top grass is more golden and there's not a lot of dark behind it. So we want to try not to get this dark colour into the sky. So we've got to kind of leave a bit of a gap between the sky and the dirt. But even so, we've got to build up this thick, lush under part. Okay, like that. Yum, yum, yum. I just love this blue violet colour and this gorgeous magenta-y red colour. It's so yummy. And underneath these yellows and greens of the grass, it's going to be really nice. So what I'm trying to do is create a dark base coat, basically. So then when we put our lighter and mid-tones over it, and we'll add more dark, they kind of pop and sit forward and look really yummy on the dark. So you'll end up with filthy fingers like that, and you'll need to wipe them off again. So this little cloth is very handy. You see how by putting this rich dark underneath, and then we've got the beautiful light sky, we're just going to create such a dramatic kind of picture, because you've got such a nice range of tones. Tone is the thing. 20 years to get my head around tone. Okay, so what I can see now, so we've got, just checking my colours again, I've got this one and this one. They're my two darkest in my earth. Then the next darkest is this olivey green colour, and I can see quite a lot of that in there as well. So now we're going to start to make some grassy gestures, I guess. I'm also, just for fun, going to pop a bit of blue in there. Because we've got that blue in the sky, I think a bit of the blue down in through the grasses, around the darker areas, is just going to tie it all in together and make it a bit more interesting. So I know I said I was a realist artist, but I do like to add, you know, other colours that kind of, I don't know, tie in together and look a bit more interesting. So these are my darks and my mids for this particular section. And then we've got our lights. So this is like my straw colour, so that's going to be really nice on top of the dark. And I've got this beautiful yellow. I don't know, that might be a bit too yellow, but I really like what that does on top of the purple. Purple and yellow are yummy together. So they're going to be my lighter colours. And then we can use maybe a few bits of green, see what that looks like. That'll be nice too. And probably white or something light, maybe Australian grey or grey, just to get, oh no, it'd be nice. Light yellow. Yeah, that'd be good for the little highlighted bits. So those bits that have a little bit of shine on them. Pale yellow would be yum for there. Okay, So I'll put my dark ones aside. I've used them already, and we'll probably use those again. I just want to put a bit of blue in here for fun. So if you feel like you want to add, you know, some sort of other colour, don't be afraid to give it a try. If it doesn't work out, you can just blend it in or brush it off. But isn't that nice with the darks? I'm just going to bring a bit of that up into the horizon as well. What I don't want to do is end up with this weird light gap, I guess, between the dark and the sky. Okay, so what we don't want to do is have a bit of, you know, this weird light gap, but I don't want to put too much dark in there either, because then we'll mess up the sky a lot. So what I'm trying to do is with some of the blue, because the blue is a mid-tone, I can sort of put a little bit of it up through there to start to close that gap a bit. And now I've got my olive green. So again, if you don't have an olive green, then maybe a mid or a dark green would be nice in here. So as we're doing this, I'm starting to move my pastel in kind of grassy shapes rather than just smushing it all over the place. So see how I'm pulling it, and I've got it flat on the page. So I'm not, you can kind of alternate, I guess, between using the ends of your pastel to get that grass mark, or you can use the side of it, just lie it down on your page like that, and then just pull it up and down. If it's a short piece, then that will work really well. Okay. Remember to kind of come up and start to put a few little strands up into the sky. Not too many. Just want to go gently here and just build it up as we go. See how that's starting to build up and get nice and thick. Nice, lush, thick. Lots of grass in there. And don't forget that they crisscross over each other, so they go in different directions. So we're doing this sort of in sequence from darkest to mid colour or tone, and then we'll add a few lights at the end, but we're going to dance between them all a little bit. So by doing this, we're building up the thickness of it all. It's starting to look like it's a nice, thick, lush grass. I really like that sky. Surprisingly, I didn't think I'd like those clouds being there in the middle, but not too bad. Okay, so again, just up and down, and trying to close the gap with this brightness without putting any of my dark up in there. So just put a little bit of the green in there, and then we'll pick up the next colour, which I'm going to try the yellow actually. I think I'm going to put some of this yellow, this rich, bright yellow in there, because I can see a lot of that on the top between the sky and the grass. So let's pop some of that in. And again, I can use it on its side and just get that lovely, more natural sort of mark going on. See how that looks like it's sitting on the surface now. So I've got all this lovely colour. Bit of tape somewhere in there. Getting in the way. Sometimes you're better just to take the corners down, because then you don't have this big strip of tape in the way. So I'm just going to cheat a little bit, and if you feel like you need to close this gap between the sky and the grass, then just pop a bit of yellow in there like this. We can go over it and add more layers and kind of thicken that up a little bit, but what I want to do is just get that yellow in there, because it's got such a nice sunshiny shine to it. And then we can kind of pull some of it down into the dark as well, and that'll give us that nice continuous feeling. So what I did was just smudge this across the top to close the gap so that we haven't got the light paper showing through. between the sky and the grass. And there is quite a lot of like bright yellow on the surface there. And again, I'm still using this on its side. I really like doing grass with the sides of the pastels because it just has such a natural kind of feel, and you get a range of thicknesses, I guess. And so it's not all the same size or stroke, you know. And then you can alter that and do a few, use the end of your pastel to get a few harder or sharper marks as well. So that's starting to come together nicely. All right, so I'm going to put my yellow down before I put too much on. This yellow pastel is I think it's a schminky. So schminky pastels are really creamy. They're like butter, but they fill up the tooth of the paper very quickly. So they're luxurious and they're beautiful. But if you use too much, then you actually can't get much more on. And I want to kind of be able to add a bit more to this before I say it's done. So now I've got some of my yellow on there. I'm going to come back to my olivey green and just add some of that and put this back in over the top. So even though we used some olive green before, this is the mid one that we had earlier. I want to build up my thicknesses with this. So essentially what we're doing is just using each colour and then putting some grass in with each one. And as we do that, it just gets thicker and more lush. So that's the thought process behind that. It's just to build this up nice and thick. Don't forget to take a few little strands up into the sky. And you know, when you do strands like that, you can kind of start off with a thicker. Remember we talked about the seed heads or whatever they are on those bits of grass. So you can start off, I'm going to show you, just start with pressing harder so you get a thicker line, then lift and then press hard again. And so you get a really nice variation in the shape of the stem. So it's just all about, you know, getting familiar with using the pastels. You can put it down if I want to make another little head on one. Press it down, give it a little wiggle so it gets an interesting shape, lift up and then pull it down. So there's lots of, I don't know, gestures. And imagine if you were using paint brushes, you'd do a similar thing with paint brushes. You'd load it up with paint and put a big blob down, and then you might have a smaller brush that you do finer lines with. So it's just about getting that variation going on just with the sticks and the gestures and the way you hold it and how hard you press. And while I'm doing this, actually, I'm using the end of my pastel stick to get a finer line, but I'm actually twisting it as well at the same time. So when you twist it, you kind of get a nice variation in the thickness as well. So don't be afraid to try a few different things because it's actually quite fun to, you know, see what else happens when you hold it differently or do different gestures or movements or lines with it. So you can see how by, you know, just building up your layers with your different colours and tones, it starts to get lovely and lush and thick. And so I think I've had enough of olive green for now. So now I want to, what else can I put in there? Try blue again. So I know there's no blue in the actual grass, but I think a bit of blue, just a few little lines of blue is fun. And everything reflects what's around it, doesn't it? So if you've got some blue sky, then there's got to be, you know, a hint of blue elsewhere. And it just makes it so much more fun and interesting, I think, when you can play with some colours. What I want to do, I'm noticing here, see where we've got this yellow part that kind of meets the sky. And what I want to do now is soften that up. So I want to start to get a more natural finish around there because you can't actually see the hard line between the sky and the top of the grass. It's all got this, you know, soft wispy stuff coming up in front of it. So Now we need to work on that edge a little bit and start to soften that up so that it doesn't look like there's a hill behind it. Does that make sense? So I just want to, yeah, get some more variation in there with the yellow. So let's go back to the yellow again and start to bring that up and break that line up a little bit so it's starting to look more natural. See how that works? So I've picked up my yellow and I'm just doing these up and down kind of marks just to get the top edges of that looking softer. So we want to kind of vary the edge so that we don't get that, what looks like a hill or a mound. I mean, it could be if you want it to be. Doesn't really matter that much, does it? No one else knows what this was or is. But I do like the more natural edge, I guess, of the grass coming up through there. So that's a bit of the yellow. And then don't forget in the foreground, some of those bits of grass kind of leaning over, aren't they? They're going sideways and the little tips of them are catching the light. So you could do some of those that brings those bits of grass closer to us and forward. So again, that helps to build up the thickness of the field. So you've got to break the lines up sometimes with, you know, blades of grass going in different directions, especially this grass because it's kind of wild and out in the open and it's wind blown. And so most of it's kind of heading in one direction because you can see that the wind's blowing it. But then you've got all these little random bits that sort of crisscross in front to break it up a little bit. So that's the secret. But don't do too many because then it gets too, I don't know, it looks like, you know, it's been painted, basically. All right, so that's a nice range of, you know, yellow grass. I reckon I'm going to add, put in there now. I know I want to highlight some of my grasses, so I'm going to see what this colour looks like. This was the umber that I picked up earlier. I don't know if it's actually light enough. It's a good mid-tone. Let me see, what's that going to do? Yeah, maybe. I'll put a few of those in. So it's like a sandstone sort of colour. It's not bright, it's not dark, it's just in between. And your mid-tones are just as important as your lights and darks. I know I put a lot of emphasis on light and dark, but without mids, you can't have either, really. So it is important to have, you know, enough mid-tones in the art as well, so that the other parts pop. Yeah, that's quite nice, that mid-tone. I'm usually drawn to really bright colours, but it's good to pick up those mids. Yeah, that's making it a lot thicker, giving it some density. So if you have a creamy colour, or this is what I don't know what this one's called, I should know, but it's like a sandstone ochre, maybe. The trouble is when you buy pastels, they've all got their tags and names, and then you take the plastic off and can't remember what they were. So when I go to work, if I have a colour I want, I actually have to take it with me so I can colour match it. I don't know what they're called. So what I'm doing now is just popping a few little bits of tips onto these with this lovely little mid straw colour. And then when we put some highlights in, that's just going to really brighten up a few spots and make them shine and look like they're catching the light. So growing grass happens slowly. It takes a while to get there. And lots of my students hate doing grass because they find it really monotonous and boring. But I think it's fun. Most of my landscapes will have a lot of grass in them because I just think it's so interesting finding the different colours that kind of work together. And and adding colours in that you wouldn't normally think about. For instance, let's try this bit of red or magenta. Remember I said to pick up a dark red, so we did pop that in the background when we were trying to make some darks. But now, ooh, that's nice. See, now when we add a bit of dark in and pull it up through the grass and make more, it adds so much more depth to it. So just because we put dark down first doesn't mean you can't pick it up again and add it in, because this is so lush and thick, so we need to keep building it, building, making it thicker. And this red colour is just beautiful. I've got to put some green in too, just for fun. I'll end up with rainbow grass at this stage. So this is where, for me anyway, I've got to be careful I don't overdo it and just keep adding and adding, because it's really tempting to keep putting more colour in and see what happens. I'm still trying to break up that little line between the grass and the sky. I think we're nearly there, but it's still looking a little bit too obvious. I'm going to try some of this dark just to put some strands in there and try to break that up a little bit. It's getting better. So see how the dark colour just made the lighter colours pop a little bit more, but it's also created all this beautiful density, this lovely thick lush grass. Nice. I might even pick up some of my blue violet. So that was the really dark one that we used at the start. I put a bit more shadow and stuff in there with that one. It's not as rich or warm, I guess is the colour for the word, as the red, but it certainly helps to create that density. It's kind of fun. And so you can kind of see how, you know, the forward pieces of grass, the ones that are catching the light, the brighter ones, they just do a few of those in the foreground and they come forward, and you can see that there's sunshine on those. I'm using my yellow. I did say I should get a lighter yellow. I didn't go and get that. That's lovely because it kind of just breaks it up a little bit. I'm not going to get a light yellow, so I can add a few little highlights here and there. Oh, I said green too. Here we go, rainbow grass. So this is a limey green. Ooh, that's interesting. Probably a bit too much, really. I should calm down. But it's fun to see what happens. And of course, all grass has green in it, doesn't it? Somewhere. I'll just have a little cluster of green here. That's nice. And then you can either, find a pale yellow or something like this Australian grey, or even white. I feel like white might be a bit too bright, but you could try it if that's all you've got. And just put a few little highlights here and there. So these are the few bits of strand of grass that are catching the sun or the light. And they're broken lines too, so don't always make them a whole strand that sits in the front. You can kind of break them a little bit so that they look like they might be sitting behind others. When I say break, I mean just do dabs instead of whole lines. And yeah, just a few. Well, see, I say just a few and then I just keep doing it because it's fun. That's enough, put that down. All right. So I reckon that grass is pretty much done. And then if you wanted to, you know, keep playing with it. You can always add a few little flowers or something like that to make it your own. Put a little animal in there, whatever you want really. But it's fun, and you know, this is just a little practice piece, and it's just lots of fun to see what happens when you build up the thickness and the layers like that. So if, for instance, I can't help myself, see, I've got to put some flowers in there. I wanted to put a few little yellow flowers in here. They don't have to be perfect, just do some little yellow dots like that. So literally just a smooch. And they don't all have to have exactly 5 petals on them, because they might be facing another way and you can only see 3. So something like that, just to give it a little bit of a interest, you know, to make it a bit more exciting. I feel like I need to put one up here now. There we go. And now I've got 4, and they always say you should have an uneven number. So we need one more yellow flower somewhere, and then you've got to figure out, where will I put that? Maybe it can go here. Just a tiny one. There we go. And if you put one in and you don't like it, just give it a little dab, push it off into the distance, and maybe go over it with a bit more grass or something. But see how just adding those few little bits of flowers, and they're just little dabs, you know, they're not even specifically petals or anything, they're just little dabs of colour that highlight it just a tiny bit and make it a bit more interesting. So that is the grass class today. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you haven't finished, then please do, and send me your photos because I'd love to see them. I still feel like I want to add more, but I better calm down and stop doing that, or I'm going to wreck it. At the end of the day, I just want to tip off some of my dust again. So just tip that off onto the side here. And there we go. She's done. Don't forget to sign it too, so that's always important. And the best thing to sign your pastels with is either a charcoal pencil. So this is a, no it's not, this is a pastel pencil. The Fabers are really nice pencils. You can buy them individually. They're about $3.95 each, or you can buy a set. They're expensive, but they're really beautiful pencils. Or you can use a charcoal pencil, so either a black or a white, so you can get white charcoal, can you? And then just pop your name in the corner, and there you are. Today's painting is complete. So if you're watching this video, thank you for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed today's class, and I really look forward to seeing your artwork. Thanks for coming.